8 former heads of state, including Thabo Mbeki, will be panellists at the inaugural Fundi Education Forum in Johannesburg tonight. Education Credit Provider Fundi says the panel discussion with UNISA and the African Presidential Leadership Centre will put education centre stage to enable economic growth. The forum will create a platform for business and academia to engage and garner invaluable insights from the former leaders. And Ntukwana Khatane is our reporter in Melrose, Johannesburg. We're live to her now. Good afternoon, Ntukwana. A sterling opportunity, really, to garner knowledge from a panel of luminaries on the African continent.
Indeed, Kirshni, good afternoon. We're coming to you live from Melrose here in Johannesburg, where Fundi, formerly known as EduLoan, which has spread its wings in terms of the service provision, has organized an education forum. And this education forum has brought together, at least who are coming here today, 6 former heads of state and government, prime ministers and presidents from the African continent to talk about the role that education can play in economic growth on the continent. And I can tell you that some of the names that I see here come off the biggest economies, including Nigeria. But with me to discuss this at depth is the CEO of Fundi, and that is Amasi Mwela. Thank you very much for joining us. Why this forum this year?
So what we're hosting tonight is the Fundi Education Forum. What we're trying to do is bring together business, government, former heads of state, and just try and gain as much wisdom from the past as we can while we look to build towards the future and see what happens in the education space across the African continent.
Now, who are we expecting to come here this afternoon?
They are numerous business leaders that will be sitting in the audience. There's various spots, stakeholders, there's academics, there's students that will be represented. There's a number of stakeholders in the education system that we're bringing together with the view of trying to see from an education perspective, how do we take this forward Africa-wide? And I think it's something that we've been keenly looking at as an organization. What we're looking to do is expand into Africa. We've been in South Africa for 20 years. We are currently in Zimbabwe. We've just launched 2 years now in Zimbabwe, and that's going quite well. And part of our strategy is to try and understand the African continent to see how we can understand and help the continent further in education.
And of course, everyone wants to know the heads of state, former heads of state, who will be here this afternoon.
Yes, they will be. So there will be a number from various countries. We're still expecting final confirmations, but there will be at least 6 former heads of state coming. Nigeria is represented, Tanzania, Ghana, Zambia is represented, and we'll see as soon as we get in exactly who arrives. But we've booked about 6 or 7 former African heads of state, and they will be coming.
Now, when you talk about Africa, you're talking about a basket of very different countries, very different economies. What sort of outcomes would you be expecting to get out of this forum?
So it might be different economies and different baskets, but Africa's problems are keenly, I wouldn't say the same, but they're similar. So what we're looking to do is try and gain some insight from those that have gone before us in some cases, and just try and gain some understanding in terms of where we come from in the past as we look to build into the future. The different countries might be different, the languages might be different, but in the bigger scheme of things, as a continent, I think we've got so much in common, and we can solve a lot of the education problems together. That's the approach that Fundi's taken.
Now, I've said that you come from the experience of EduLoan, which has been in South Africa for a long time. We have seen in recent times things like fees must fall, which are just some of the challenges that are facing the education sector. But also you have a lot of graduates who are coming out of African universities but don't have jobs, showing that there's a mismatch of skills, if you like, from the education sector to the job market. What are some of the challenges that you have seen coming to this forum?
I think as corporates in general, I think it is about time we also started playing a much keener role in terms of trying to solve the problem. So from a corporate perspective, I think we as business leaders need to start looking at ourselves and seeing how we can participate in being part of the solution. There's a lot of good initiatives that the corporate space has been doing, but I generally think we can do significantly more, not just here, but across the continent to participate in solving some of our educational problems.
Right, and that is Amasi Mwela. He is the CEO of Fundi here in South Africa. They have brought together at least 7 heads of state or former heads of state and government from the African continent. We expect to hear from them how they can advise policy in order to ensure that education contributes towards economic growth in Africa. The World Bank has said, according to Fundi, that more than 11 million graduates come out of Africa every year, and for the next 10 years, that is what is expected to happen. But will they match the job market that is required, or the economic growth, or the skills shortage that is required to ensure that Africa grows its economy? It's back to you, Kashni.
Ntukwan Katana coming to us from the inaugural Fundi Education Forum. That's on in Melrose, Johannesburg.